Right, we will press on with our next presentation. We're now going to hear from Andy Briercliffe, who's the head of the Child Safety Online team at Protection Group International, or PGI. Andy's been working in the online safety landscape for over 12 years, covering all online harm topics, but with a specific knowledge focus on online child safety. He's also dedicated 7 years to the National Crime Agency Child Sexual Exploitation and Abuse Unit. Prior to his valued work on protecting children, Andy spent over 20 years in UK law enforcement and is highly regarded in the global trust and safety landscape. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and morning everybody. As that introduction says, I've spent 20 years UK law enforcement and specifically 7 years on the designated bureau within the National Crime Agency, where we received all the reported content that happened predominantly on online platforms. That was received from NetMech, which is the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children. They receive about 32 million reports a year. However, here in the UK, we also received reports from charities, all the police forces in the UK, global police forces and other organisations. So NetMech is just a small part of that particular figure. Part of my job was to view and assess all the reported content. So about this, where we're here this week, about age estimating people online. That was my job manually, having to estimate users. And just to shock you, I wasn't always age estimating faces, bodies as well. So that was an interesting skill to have. I was then a CSE lead at social media. I'm going to call it Twitter, because it was Twitter when I was there. That was a can of worms, looking at it on a global level, across multi-cultures, languages, all the complexities around that. Then obviously when we had the reorganisation at Twitter, found myself at a bit of a gap, so I was a consultant. And now I'm the head of a child safety team at PGI. We're also looking at all the other various high harms as well. So this talk is a little bit about what I've seen over my history of looking at the content and so on and so forth. As I say, I've also dealt with suicide, self-harm reported content, hate, terrorism, extremism, you name it, I've seen it. Well, we always say we've seen it, and then the next day you see something else. That's helped me understand user behaviour, including how young people use platforms and gaming sites and dating sites, as well as adults, obviously, sharing content or how they try to approach young people and get them to open up for grooming and sextortion. How young people try to avoid detection as well. Obviously we're here talking about age verification. So what have they done to bypass what was already there? And that's what we're going to talk about. Also, victim and offender identification, hunting down the victims and safeguarding them, hunting down the offenders, the real horrible people on a global level, and doing the intelligence research, looking at the patterns, the trends, what everybody's using, whether that be, again, young people, whether that's offenders, how they're doing it, what are the latest things, because what might happen in one country will be different to maybe what's happening in the UK. But then sometimes you might find a bit of a flow coming over a few months later, because obviously, as we know, everybody chats on social media. So as we know, the globally accepted age of a child is under 18. Obviously, around the world, we've got different ages of consent, and even in America, different states have different ages of consent. So that causes a bit of an issue. Different platform policies change as well. Some say 13, some say 15, depends on the content, what you can upload. Some platforms allow the upload of adult nudity, some don't. Some are super strict. You can't even upload, say, an art picture if it depicts a child. Prime example of that is the music album Nirvana, for those that might remember that. It was a picture of a child. The person who's grown up, they actually went to court to claim that that picture was CSAM. They did actually lose, but some platforms will not even allow that album to be sold because of that picture. But others will look at it as actually it's a music album, so therefore it is allowed. So there's a bit of a conflict there. Young people, as we know, are absolutely embedded in today's tech world. You know, they live it, they breathe it. You know, trying to get a child off tech is probably harder than anything. Everything they do is literally, well, everything we do as well, isn't it? It's laziness now, isn't it? Why type in www.say.bbc when we can just press a button? You know, food shopping is one click. Everything we do is literally one click. And if you actually look at the tech you've got in your home and what is available, you can switch your kettle on in one click. Your heating, your lighting, everything. We've just become a lazy society, basically. And it's across everything, whether it's shopping, dating, whatever, all the shopping sites, not just Amazon or eBay. You know, the supermarkets have problems, you know, with online safety, don't they? Because of fraud. If we're booking a hotel, you know, we know that, for instance, Airbnb, for instance, had quite a problem with young people booking, you know, places to go and have a party. So all these problems across every single platform. So young people, especially teenagers, absolutely hate being referred to as children. For those of you who may have teenagers or have had teenagers, if you've ever referred to them as a child, you suddenly discover a teenage tantrum very, very quickly. You know, I'm not a child. And then you say, well, actually, yes, you are. This has happened for as long as, well, time, ever since laws of ages, age laws, sorry, have been in place. I'm not suggesting any of us ever did this, but, you know, when we were younger, did we ever try and buy alcohol underage? Did we try and sneak into that cinema, you know, film? That was not our age limit, you know. And, you know, people have been getting fake IDs for years and years and years. The difference is it's now more prevalent online. That's what teenagers are doing. UK age laws can be confusing as well. You know, you can get married at 16. You can join the army at 16. You drive at 17. You know, you can drink at 18. Some bars are saying 21. You know, I'm just wondering whether it might be an idea just to have one age for everything. You know, make life super simple. Because if we get confused by it, young people are getting confused by it as well. So, you know, and that makes this whole online landscape super confusing as well. So, teenagers want to be part of the adult community. As I say, you know, you call them a child, all hell breaks loose, basically. You know, they don't want to feel like they're missing out. You know, do they want to see child-related stuff? No, they want to see adult stuff. And I'm not talking adult pornography here. You know, they do want to see certain graphic things. You know, they can go and watch certain graphic films, and that's acceptable. You know, let's just say The Terminator. You know, there's lots of violence in that, so why can't they see lots of violence online as well? You know, so there's a lot of confliction. They don't want to be left out. You know, if some of their school friends have access to a particular platform, well, if they don't have a particular platform, they might get bullied, or they're missing out on all the social chat, what's going on. So, you know, if platform A is the biggest one in that particular school and you're not on it, that's going to be a problem. Obvious indicators when we're looking at these, yeah, you know, they put their real age in the date of birth bit. That's really useful. You know, we can tell straight away their ages. We look at the content as well. You know, do they post pictures of their friends' birthday parties? If they go, hey, I'm celebrating my friend's 13th birthday, well, we're going to have a clue what age they are as well. Other events, you know, it could be school leaving parties, or a prom, as we like to call them now in the UK, isn't it? You know, a school sports day. Any other of these indicators can help us ID that child, as it were, give us an indication. And their selfie photos, you know, they put that on their profile page. You know, as I say, we used to do this manually. We used to understand facial features and look at certain things as well. We also used to look at how they were dressed, what's in the background of that picture. You know, we might see a school uniform in the background, so that gives us an indication. Bedding, wallpaper, you know, as I say, how they're dressed. A 13-year-old, a 12, 13-year-old will dress very differently to a 16-year-old. You know, if you're hip and you're trendy and you know what's the fashion, you know, I certainly don't, but that is a bit of an indication as well. And then the not so obvious, they were getting a little bit smart because they realized that if they put their actual date of birth in the profile, we would spot it. So what they would do, they'd use a date of birth over 18, and then in their profile page, they'd put 18 wink. I'm not sure why they would do that if they were legally old enough, but that was one of the indicators. They would put in the lower to greater sign, again with a wink or even without the wink. They were putting that information in there to show that they were under 18 because they wanted to still be part of that adult community, but still wanted to interact with people from various ages. And sometimes they did it to actually attract older people. There's this thing called the MAP community, which is minor attracted person. There is a whole other legal argument around that, which I'm not going to go into. For some strange reason, teenagers saw this as a bit of a trend. So 15, 16, 17-year-olds were going around on platforms saying they were MAPs, which is a little bit weird. As I say, it was a bit of a trend. Not only did that attract other like-minded teenagers, but it also attracted a lot of offenders as well, a lot of older people. That phrase MAP, and there's certain connotations to it, so you could have C, the letter C, then MAP, which would identify contact, or pro-MAP, so you're very pro that. That was identified by a lot of the platforms as a banned terminology. So again, teenagers were picking up on this, so they started using the logo MAP, or the emoji MAP, I should say. Sometimes adding numbers after that as well to indicate their age. So it'd be the MAP emoji 14, MAP emoji 16 or something like that. Obviously, that's hard to utilize in a content moderation context because that emoji is perfectly legal. And even if you put a number after it, it's still perfectly legal. There's a lot of, what can I say, interest in just maps generally, you know, geographical. So we can't just say, right, we're going to ban this emoji. It's used for all sorts of purposes. So a little bit tricky trying to look at it. And as I say, once we figured out they were using 18 and things like that, they'd quickly move on to something else. So it's very much that we have to try. We're not going to stay ahead of the game, but if we can try and stay as level as possible, then it helps. Then we had not so obvious. They were getting clever. So what they started is using mathematics. Now, I'm not going to test any of you here, but I think the top one is quite simple. They would put these in their profiles. So they put, again, an over 18 age, and then put this, you know, 10 times 2, minus 7, 13. Why would anybody put that in a profile? You know, unless you're maybe a complete maths geek, maybe not that actual one, that's a bit easy, but, you know, there's no reason for it. The only reason is to indicate age. Yeah, the 44 divided by 2 minus 8 again. You know, we started seeing this. We started working it out, and they moved on again. They started doing equations. Now, if like me, you have not done equations since school time, that was a pain in the backside, because not only did we have to work out the equation, we had to remember how to work out the equation. And these are the most simplistic versions they were using. Some of these teenagers were getting really clever. They probably just learned it in school that day. But as I say, why would any child or any teenager put that in a profile page? There's no reason to do it, you know. Then they got even cleverer. They started using coordinates. I've put in the north and the west in this, just to make it easier, but they weren't. So the first time we started this, we were there thinking, what are these figures on about? You know, took us a little while to figure it out. And there's various types of this, and this pinpoints to geographies or locations around the world that has certain words in. So this is actually a place in America. Youngstown, it's because it has the word young in it. If it has the word child in it, or anything related to that, it indicates they are a child, they're under 18. In Japan and the Far East, they were trying to do this similar thing with the word shota. And if you know what that means, it's, underage children as well. It got really confusing. But again, AI and, the tech, how we can use it to identify it, but there's perfectly legal reasons why those coordinates or similar coordinates might be on a profile. I can't really think that often, but, I don't know what they're going to come up with next, really, to be honest, but this is why we have to stay on it all the time. If they've got a sibling as well, they'd be putting in the sibling's date of birth, and the sibling will be over 18. So when you are then looking for them, and you do your intel, you might find a person who is over 18 with the same surname at least. So then you have to try and figure out, well, who's who, especially, if they're wearing makeup and things like that, especially if they're girls and boys nowadays as well. So that can get a little bit confusing. And now we have AI and Photoshop editing, filtering of the images. Whereas before, we used to have a pretty good guess of looking at a person's profile. We could guess their age. But now with filters and with the AI, it's getting a lot harder to do that. So we have to try and figure out what they're doing, how they're doing it. We've seen a few reports lately, obviously, in schools where they will crop the images of their classmates to be considered CSAM and things like that. So we have to try and work out the ages is from that. Obviously, there is a lot of stuff I could show you, but I can't show you because I'm conscious of your mental health and well-being, and we don't know what can affect all of you. It could be the simplistic thing. Obviously, I'm not going to show you anything horrible, but I've just had to do a bit of a brief overview of how these cheeky little teenagers are trying to avoid detection these days. So super quick, and I know it's lunchtime, but thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
We'll start with Anu.
Thank you very much for your presentation. What I'm experiencing with contact with my kids is that they don't feel that there is a control, actually. I mean, they post pictures with pictures with alcohol of them in parties and so on, because they don't see that there will be a consequence. And I think that part of maybe the answer to why you say, why would they do that, is they say it is a game rather than as something serious. What do you think about that? Because I get the feeling that they don't take police or anybody else who's controlling it serious.
Yeah, I think like everything we've talked about, a lot of this comes down to education, and it's educating not just the young people, and it's not just parents, it's a lot of people, adults as well, about what they're posting and the consequences. And I'm not necessarily talking the bad stuff, what they're posting here as well. A prime example, if you like, this is not quite child related, but famous footballers and their partners have a tendency to post themselves on the beach and their lovely little, very expensive watches and things, and then the house gets burgled, because they're saying they're away and, hey, I have a mansion with lots of stuff in. So it's educating people to just understand and have that awareness of what they're posting, and, putting in the right controls, for kids especially, lock it down as much as possible. We can't, as we've said in a couple of the other talks, there's no silver bullet. We're not going to be able to solve the entire problem, but if we can at least mitigate the problem, mitigate the risks, and reduce it, that's a lot better. So it's just bringing the awareness of being, what you post and things like that.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. I'm Leander from the Five Rights Foundation. I thought it was really interesting how you said that many kids and teenagers are obviously wanting to participate. So they're wanting to be on these platforms, but at the same time, they want people, at least their friends, things, they still want people to know that they are of this age, right?
Yeah.
They still think age is an important factor that they want to get out there. Which implies, I think, lots of things, and really big conversation we could have around that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is that a trend you have seen increasing, that kids are actually, posting things that do demonstrate their age? Or is that something that's always been there? Has it always been relevant to them?
I would say it's always been relevant. That, as you say, we could have another longer discussion about this, but I think it's a little bit to do with the ages. So if they're about 10, 11, they're doing it for one particular reason. If they're older, like 15, 16, it's because they want to be involved in the over 18 communities for whatever reason. There are, it could be all sorts of reasons, really. Some are more dangerous than others. But it has always happened, and this has happened across all the platforms. Even some of the dating sites, that they want to be involved in that sort of line of work, I should say, shouldn't say that, but that area. I mean, we hear of the phraseologies, sugar daddies and sugar mummies and things like that. These youngsters want that sort of connection. They look at it sometimes of a way to make money as well, and we know kids like money. So if there's a way to connect with the older people who bizarrely want to interact with them and give them gifts and money and whatever else, then kids will do it. There's some weird stuff out there. Yeah.
I've got one more. That'll be your second, so I'll go first.
Go on then.
It's interesting from the age verification provider's perspective. Originally, the legislation generally was phrased as we want to stop children stumbling across pornography, for example. So the bar was stopping most kids seeing most bad stuff most of the time, but never really trying to be 100% perfect about it, because we didn't. But and there is a trade-off. I mean, we can be almost 100% certain if we want to be, but it'll be extremely inconvenient, because every 10 minutes you'll need to prove you're still the same person sitting at the computer who was there 10 minutes ago when you proved your age. So, but I think some of the things you've been talking about today just remind us that that low bar may not actually always be sufficiently high, given some of the more high impact harms that are online if we don't get the age right. I think particularly about young kids going on dating sites, as you say, pretending to be adults, meeting people in real life, and then bad things happening and so on. So it's really made me think a little bit more about where that bar needs to be and what the balance is.
Yeah, and I mean, on some of these, what these young people are doing is actually legal, but this terminology, legal but harmful. On certain shopping sites, these under 18s are selling various types of content. I'm not going to go into detail, but that is stuff that they shouldn't be doing, but it's actually legal. So how do we sort of combat that from an age perspective? So there's a lot of challenges. Yeah.
Thanks. Did you still have a question?
Well, the question is rather like an observation. I was wondering, what do you think about it? I see kids in my class over the ages getting more childish with the same age. So kids who are 16 behave more and more like 13-year-olds like a few years ago. And I see this the duality between them, like they want to be adults, but also they want to be kids at the same time. And for instance, in my classroom, if we have a really intense topic like disinformation, we're next to the Russian border, then they might state something like, and now I want to be kid again. So do you see that's also a part of it, like that they don't really choose between being kid and adult yet, and they sort of go back and forth?
Yeah, absolutely, especially when you look at things, as I say, clothing, for instance, if they're 13, 14, they'll still, majority of the time, dress within that age bracket, but they still also want to be involved in the older, age bracket as well. Similar with music, a lot of young people are certainly into K-pop, at the moment, for instance. But again, they still want to be involved in that older community. So yeah, there is that constant flip into, do they want to be treated in one way or viewed as one way, or do they want to be treated? And that's what I say, if you do call a teenager a child, you're in for a world of hell for about 5 minutes anyway.
Great. Well, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you very much.